Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you one tip for a tighter and punchier kick drum. We're going to be talking about compression on kick drums today, but before we dive in, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process as a whole and really start to hone your workflow as a mixer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. This is a simple PDF that will guide you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without the guesswork and without the hassle. It is completely free. You can download it below using the link in the description below the video. Now let's jump in here and start talking about kick drums, okay? Before we dive into the actual kick drum, let me play you the drums inside the track, and then I will solo up the drums by themselves so you can get an idea of what the kick drum sounds like inside the track as a whole, and then along with the drums. This is the final mix. We don't need the phase window or input controls open for this one. So here is the track as a whole, and then I'll solo up our drums here. As you can hear here, our kick drum is doing quarter note pulses, right? It's kind of a 4 on the floor type of feel. So we don't want our kick drum to be too long or to have too much ring to it. Otherwise, it's going to get messy sounding as the kick drum continues to pulse. That kind of ring or longness to a kick drum will build up as you hit the kick drum over and over. And you don't want that to build up. Then you'll have some craziness in your low end. That kind of low ring is tough to deal with. Then you're notching out pieces on your kick drum and fighting your low end. You don't want to do that. So what you want is we're going to use a compressor here to tighten up our kick drum, both in the low end and as a whole drum, right? So we're going to shorten it up a little bit so it doesn't ring as far, and it's really going to hone in on our low end, right? It's going to tighten it up a little bit so it's not too big and it doesn't have too much ring and it does not too long through our track. The other thing our compressor is going to do is help to give it a little bit of punch, right? You heard that it really punches through the track when you're listening to the entire mix, right? You can hear that kick drum pulsing underneath the track, and it's nice and strong here. So let's focus in on our kick drum. Here is our compressor. This is the main tool we're using here to tighten up our kick drum and give it that extra punch or that extra snap that we're looking for so it cuts through the track, because this is a dense mix here. So I'm going to play you with the compressor, and then I'm going to take off the compressor. Listen to how our kick drum gets a little bit messier sounding, a little bit more dull. It's a little bit too long. We have too much ring in our low end, and it's not quite as snappy. So we'll start with it, and then I'll pull it off. Listen to how the kick drum changes here. You can hear without our compressor there, our kick drum gets pretty dull sounding. It doesn't have that top end snap that contributes to our punch that's going to help this kick drum really cut through a big mix like this. And you can hear without the compressor also, our kick drum kind of lays out a little bit. It gets longer, that ring comes up a little bit, and it kind of blends through all our kicks, right? The more it hits, the more we get more of that ring. And it's a little bit messy sounding without this compressor in there to tighten up. Let's take a look here what we're doing with our compressor. So we have our attack set at 30 milliseconds, so a little bit on the slower side for me, I guess. Our release here is at 120 milliseconds. That's kind of my general settings for compressing kick drum. This is usually the general way this compressor comes up for me, the default settings. Our ratio's at 3:1 because we don't want to go too much, right? We don't want to squash our transients or anything. That's again why we have our slower attack, to let the initial transient of the kick drum come through. Otherwise, the more compression we lay on, the less of that snap and the less of that punch we're going to get from the kick drum. We got a soft knee here again, so we don't want it to be, or I'm sorry, a hard knee here. So it's a little bit more aggressive. We don't want it to be too soft, otherwise we're not going to get that aggression and that punch that we want out of the kick drum. Now our threshold here, we're pulling it down, so we're getting about 7 to 8 dB of compression on the kick drum. Now I know that seems like a ton of compression to lay onto the kick drum, but the reason being is we're getting rid of that ring, right? So we're squashing the kick drum down, but letting that initial transient come through. So we get that punch, but the rest of the kick drum gets compressed down, so that ring gets kind of tucked under, and we tighten up the kick drums. So essentially we're shortening our kick drum a little bit and getting a little bit more attack. You could also do this type of thing if you had the SPL Transient Designer, right? You could shorten it, pull the length back, and then pull the transient up. So emphasize the transient, and then shorten the length of your kick drum a little bit. So take a listen one more time. I'm going to pull this off a little bit one more time, and you can hear how we're getting that extra punch, and we're tightening up our kick drum a little bit. And then pay attention down here to how much compression we're doing on the kick drum. You can see we have our attack and release set in time to work with the drum. Like I said, this is my starting point for kick drums. When I pull in the compressor, it defaults to 30 millisecond attack and 120 millisecond release. That's always a great starting point for compressing kick drum, but you want to tweak it a little bit so it moves in time. So this is a quarter note pulse. So we want that release to be gone. We want it to let go of the kick drum and stop compressing by the time our next hit comes around, and our attack is set so we let that initial transient pop through to get that kind of punchiness. I'm going to play with the release here. I'm going to pull it up a little bit, so we're going to increase it so it gets longer, and you can hear how the longer our release is, the more we're going to kind of shorten up our kick drum there. But it's going to start cutting into our next hit, which is going to affect our next transient here. You can hear when we get too long, right? It's still tight. It tightens up the kick drum, right? Because the compressor doesn't let go as fast. But then we're kind of losing, we're edging into the attack or the transient of our next hit because the compressor hasn't let go yet. So we start to lose a little bit of the transient, a little bit of the attack, and that's diminishing the amount of punch we're going to get from this kick drum. So you want to set your attack and release in time with the drum, right? Make your attack a little bit slower, medium to slow speed. I usually love 30 milliseconds on a kick drum. It's just enough time to let that initial transient pop through so you get that snap and that punch, and then set your release in time so the compressor lets go before the next kick hit. So you can tighten it up, but still allow the next transient to pop through without the compressor holding it down. One more time here. A before and after. So I'll start with it off this time. You can start with our dull kick drum, right? It's a little bit too much, and then I'll kick it in. Then we'll put it in the whole drum mix, and we'll put it in the entire track as a whole here. You can hear again when we kick that compressor on, we emphasize the attack, we emphasize that punch on the kick drum up top, but we minimize that kind of low ringing sound coming from the kick drum, which is something you'll get sometimes when having a mic inside the drum like that. So now let's put it inside the entire drum mix, and then we'll put it inside the mix as a whole again. Now 7 to 8 dB of compression on your kick drum may seem a lot, but keep in mind, it's just enough to tighten up our kick drum, emphasize the punch on top, but we're not going too far that we're neutering the low end on our kick drum. I hope that was helpful for you all. Again, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as a mixer, then I have just the gift for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. You can download it below and start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.